So, fun fact, there's a Dracula movie that I actually really like that I wanted to make certain was included on this list. Dracula, Dead and Loving It is a movie I find myself quoting with alarming frequency, but I've already talked about Leslie Nielsen's life and career when we covered Santa Clauses. Claus-I? Santa's Claus? Anyway, I covered his life in my analysis of 2000's Santa Who, and if you're watching on the web, you can see the link for that video popping up in the corner right now. And it'll also be linked in the description, but yeah, covering Leslie Nielsen would be kind of redundant at this point. So let's talk about Mel Brooks. Born in 1926 in Brooklyn, New York, Melvin Kaminsky grew up in Williamsburg. His father's family came from Germany, while his mother's family came from present-day Ukraine, although, at the time, it was still a part of the Russian Empire. Brooks was the youngest of four brothers and grew up experiencing a series of health problems that, combined with his short stature, made him a target of severe bullying at school. At age 9, his Uncle Joe, who frequently got free theater tickets as tips in his job as a taxi driver, took him to see Anything Goes with William Gaxton, Ethel Merman, and Victor Moore. Brooks fell in love with Broadway immediately and declared that he was going to be an entertainer. By the age of 14, he started working professionally as an entertainer, picking up work as a pool tumbler, essentially a master of ceremonies for pool parties, and also as a drummer, using the drummer skills he had learned in his lessons with Buddy Rich. At the age of 16, Brooks was playing a drumming gig at a comedy club when the MC was too ill to go on, and he stepped into the role for his first professional comedy gig. It was around this time that Mel Kaminsky got tired of being confused with trumpeter and bandleader Max Kaminsky and officially changed his name to Mel Brooks, a modification of his mother's maiden name, Brookman. Brooks started as a freshman at Brooklyn College, studying psychology, but it was only a year before he was drafted into the United States Army for World War II. He scored high on the Army General Classification Test, which earned him a coveted position in the Army Specialized Training Program at Virginia Military Institute. But the program was disbanded shortly after Brooks began his studies due to manpower shortages, and he was sent back into basic training at Fort Sill. Brooks would spend World War II as a corporal in the 1,104th Engineer Combat Battalion, where he was assigned to defuse landmines. In the final days of the war and the immediate aftermath, Brooks took on a new job organizing shows for both American forces and captured Germans, the latter of which has to be the worst example of a hostile audience I've ever heard of. Returning home, he hit the Borscht Belt circuit as a drummer and pianist, and another instance stepping in for a sick comedian started him on a path as a stand-up comic. He wound up with a regular gig as the tumbler at Grossinger's Resort and started picking up work on the side as a joke writer, which is where he was found by Sid Caesar, who originally hired him as a joke writer for $50 a week. Caesar would then bring Brooks on as a regular writer when he began work on 1950's Your Show of Shows, which would lead into a long and successful career as a television writer and creator. Backstage at Your Show of Shows, Brooks struck up a friendship with the man who would be his longtime collaborator, Carl Reiner. The two would begin performing their 2,000-year-old man routine at parties, which would be discovered and picked up as a regular bit by The Steve Allen Show, ultimately leading to a successful series of comedy albums and an animated television special. Brooks would later say that the royalties from the sales of the 2,000-Year-Old Man albums were good enough that they provided his major source of income during rocky patches in his career. Toward the mid-1960s, Brooks's star was on the rise, with an Academy Award for Animated Short Film for Brooks's The Critic, and the launch of Get Smart, which Brooks co-created with Buck Henry. Brooks said that the idea grew out of his being bored with what he called nice, sensible situation comedies. No one had ever done a show about an idiot before, he said. I decided to be the first. Doing a show about an idiot paid off with 7 Emmy Awards for the series during its run, although Brooks would depart from working on the show actively following the first season to pursue other projects.
Work. Hello, boys. Have a good night's rest. I missed you.
Among the projects Brooks needed to focus on was his film directorial debut, 1968's The Producers. It was an idea he had been working on for years, attempting to write it first as a stage play and then as a novel before ultimately landing on writing a screenplay. Even then, it wasn't an immediate sale. He had to search for producers willing to take a chance on the movie, and finally faced rejection from distribution companies who didn't want to take a chance on the outrageous satire he had created. Finally, it wound up with a limited release as an art film premiering in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in November of 1967, and then going on to win the Oscar for Best Original Screenplay in a year when he would have been up against Stanley Kubrick for the award. He followed up the cult success of The Producers with the financial and critical bomb The 12 Chairs, and by 1972, Brooks was convinced his career was over. The career lull was short-lived, however, as a job he found working as a script doctor for Warner Brothers led directly to his being greenlit to direct 1974's Blazing Saddles. The surprise smash hit would launch Mel Brooks into a long-lasting career as one of the mainstream's favorite countercultural satirists. As I film this, Brooks has just hit the news again with the announcement that he will be writing and producing a television series for Hulu as a direct sequel to 1981's History of the World Part 1. The immediately hotly anticipated History of the World Part 2 sees Brooks teaming up with a writing and production staff that includes Nick Kroll, Wanda Sykes, Ike Barinholtz, Kevin Slater, and David Stassen.
Good. Now go.
Message in the lobby for Dr. Seward.
And you will remember nothing of what I tell you.
1995's Dracula, Dead and Loving It had its origins as a parody of the original Universal Studios Dracula movies, which apparently led to some discussion that the movie should be filmed in black and white to match the look of those movies and also to draw the connection to Brooks's Young Frankenstein. However, the scope of the movie expanded almost immediately. Much like Blazing Saddles, Dead and Loving It would not be a parody of one particular movie or even one particular studio's movies, but rather a wide-ranging spoof of an entire block of films. And, as Steve Haberman says, a lot of the great Dracula movies were in color. If Brooks was going to pull inspiration from Hammer's, Dan Curtis's, and Francis Ford Coppola's interpretations, then he was going to need a full color palette to play with. The screenplay itself began as a side project for writers Steve Haberman and Rudy DeLuca, who came up with the concept while working on a much more serious screenplay entitled Not Human. In an interview with Fangoria, the writing duo said that they had to struggle to keep that script from including moments of parody, and so they started work on the first draft of Dead and Loving It as a place to get out all of the jokes that they couldn't include in Not Human. Initially, Kelsey Grammer was in negotiations to play Dracula, but when that deal fell through, Leslie Nielsen stepped into the role. Nielsen was 68, which, at the time of that filming, made him tied with Bela Lugosi as the oldest actor to play Dracula, as Lugosi was 68 during the filming of his role in the Abbott and Costello monster movies.
We have a saying in the old country, "Nos toi vlekla, then my pushta."
They also said, Stanija ploftoi, kag mul perfuft.
Very impressed, Van Helsing. You speak the ancient Moldavian.
Validadalinka.
Steve Haberman has said that the core of the characters in Dead and Loving It is that all of the men are idiots and all of the women are beautiful.
Hello, boys. Have a good night's rest. I missed you.
And the biggest idiot of the entire movie is Leslie Nielsen's Dracula. Confident, self-assured, and absolutely irredeemably ridiculous, Nielsen wraps his mouth around a comedy Lugosi impersonation with gusto. You might be able to fault Nielsen for many things in his career, but it's hard to attack his commitment to a bit. At the time, Nielsen was riding high on the success of his career rebirth as a screwball comedy lead, and he leans into it for Dead and Loving It with all of the energy in his 6'1" frame. He is a combination of all of the key traits of the Draculas before him in their worst, most laughable forms. The film released at the tail end of 1995, and it was a box office and critical failure. On a budget of $30 million, it grossed only $10 million, 11 if you round up. Internationally, it earned nothing. It wasn't released to theaters internationally. At the time, critics and audiences saw it as a serious misstep for both Brooks and Nielsen. Chicago readers Jonathan Rosenbaum said that either this is the lamest Mel Brooks comedy ever, or it's too close to other contenders to make much difference. Joe Leedon of Variety found it to be particularly dismal, but did single out Peter MacNicol for praise in his role as Renfield. Janet Maslin of the New York Times provided one of the film's few positive reviews, and even she ranked it at a 3 out of 5, calling it slight but amusing. Since its release, audiences have been slightly more kind to the film, with a lot of people rating it as neither Brooks's nor Nielsen's best film, but deserving of much more praise than it got. As of this filming, Dracula Dead and Loving It remains Mel Brooks's final film as a director to receive a theatrical release. He would rewrite The Producers as a musical for Broadway, and in 2005, that stage adaptation would get its own adaptation back to film, but that production was directed by Susan Stroman. If you're checking out Dead and Loving It, make sure you pay attention to Madame Uspenskaya, who is played by Anne Bancroft. Bancroft was, of course, a famous and successful actress in her own right, but she was also married to Brooks from 1964 until her death in 2005. Their son, Max Brooks, has said that she was a secret closet scientist who used to read to him from Microbe Hunters as his bedtime stories. And Brooks has said that she was the guiding force behind the stage adaptations of both The Producers and Young Frankenstein. On set at Dead and Loving It, Brooks, Bancroft, and Nielsen enjoyed telling stories to the rest of the cast about Bancroft's early stage career, when she had worked with Nielsen before. So what do you think of Dracula Dead and Loving It? Are you one of those who counts it as a major step down for Leslie Nielsen and Mel Brooks? Or are you one of those people who has come to love this film in the time since it has released? Drop down into the comments below and let me know what you think of it. Also, let me know if you're excited to see what's going to come out of History of the World Part 2. And while you're down there, you can like and subscribe. You can ring the bell in order to get notifications. You all know this song and dance already. There's also a share button where you can share this video with anybody you think would be interested in it, because of course, sharing is caring. Until next time, I am Glenn Williams, the film optimist, reminding you to watch like it means something.